Marc Chagall, I think, is an amazing person. And we've probably all got some idea about what it's about. I'm going to show you lots of his art and paintings during the session. But before we get into that, what is it when you think of his art? What do you think of when you think of Marc Chagall? What's it?
Stained glass windows.
Stained glass windows, yeah, okay. Flying adult, yeah. Colour,
figures.
yeah, really sharp use of colour. Oh, somebody wants to say something online?
Figures floating in the air.
Floating in the air, that's right. Jewish? Is he Jewish?
Yes.
Well, he's Jewish, but is his art Jewish?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, his art.
He puts symbols in.
You mean,
It has Jewish symbols. It's very difficult to describe it, isn't it? Because on the one hand it's Jewish, on the other hand is very kind of filled with the motifs of the land, of the place of the Gaelic settlement, where he grew up in.
It is. There's a certain sort of land. Is it your sort of Judaism that he's describing, or Jewishness?
No, more shtetl Judaism.
Yeah.
Maybe shtetl? Maybe that flying people in the shtetl? What's all that about?
Elevation of the soul.
Maybe. So there could be something we could read into it. I think part of the interesting thing about him is, was he creating or was he painting a reality, or was it a myth that he was trying to do, like completely a creative idea? So separating that out is a really interesting issue. And what it means for our view of what is authentic Judaism. We feel very warm towards him because he's a great artist, of course. But does he say anything to us about our Jewishness? Might be something that you can have in mind. So I'm going to share the screen and put up the PowerPoint. So that should be coming through. And you can see this actually is a picture, very typical picture. It's an example of his work which he created after World War II, actually. It's now, anyone know where this is? You might have seen it. Not recently. It's in the theatre. It's in the Harold Pinter Theatre in Panton Street. And I think it's sort of quintessentially Chagall. You've got these intense colours, the quirky designs. And I'm going to talk today about his life as well as show a range of his art. So you get to see lots of his pictures. So please do come on in, both online and in the room, if you've got points or it strikes you as something interesting. Okay, so first of all, let's look at a summary of who he is. You can see he lived for a long life. And he was this preeminent, born in, well, Russia or Belarus. It was Russia at the time. Yeah, that's right. Became French, early modernist, associated with several artistic styles, really, and used many formats. So you mentioned stained glass windows and paintings. He did book illustrations. He did pottery as well. He produced over 1,000 paintings, so very fluent. And lots of his pictures are whimsical and sentimental and romantic, frankly, which I think why is attractive. He used those vivid, garish colours. And really, these floating men you mentioned, the law of physics and logic and nature just didn't apply for him. So yeah, stained glass windows. I don't know which ones you were referring to, maybe the Jerusalem ones with the pictures up there of the 12 tribes. He also did the Paris Opera. He had paintings in cathedrals at Reims and Metz. There's a church in Chudley. I don't know if any of you have ever been there in Kent. Really worth a shul visit. It's fantastic. I'll show you some pictures from there. It's entirely Chagall pictures, the only one, just him. And he created a style of modern art based on this dream-like, nostalgic ideas of Eastern European Jewish folk culture. Whether that really existed or not in the way he described it, we will discuss. So he was conscious that he'd been born a Jew, and Judaism permeates his art strongly, but he was really ambivalent about his Judaism. He was really drawn to religious themes, but was secular, determinedly so. And he really ended up in a sort of conflicted religious no man's land, as I've got here. So lots of his themes are Christian as well. It's rather ironic, because if you think of the Jewish artist, we would probably think of him, but he wasn't that, in his own mind, he wasn't sure about it, I think. He painted an enormous number of self-portraits, often as a sad clown or a theatrical figure. He was absorbed by his inner turmoil and his often traumatic life. In that way, he clearly was Jewish, perhaps to the exclusion of everything else. So he became suspicious and bitter and lonely. He fell out with most people. So he was deeply insecure. He had Jewish angst in spades. Okay, well, let's start off with his life there. And here is where he was born. So, Vitebsk. So close to the Russian border, as it now is. And this is an old picture of Vitebsk. He was born 6th of July, 1887. No, I can't pronounce this. Wait, the poor neighborhood of Peskovich. Peskovich, okay, which is in Vitebsk. So Vitebsk was about 65,000 people at the time. About half were Jewish, and it was dominated by the Lubavitch. And his grandparents lived in a shtetl of Liozno, which is about 30 miles from Vitebsk. This is one of his pictures, which he calls shtetl life. Chagall was the eldest of 8 children. This is a picture of the family. We don't know the names of most of these kids. They weren't recorded. His father, Sacha Chagall, was a laborer for a herring merchant, and his mother, Feiga Ita, now she sold groceries from their home, and they were observant Hasidic Jews. They just spoke Yiddish. Now, this is a fantastic custom which Zacha did, which I think maybe you could carry on in, or think about doing in the liberal community. In Feiga Ita's prayer book for Yom Kippur, Zacha wrote in "weep" at the relevant pages, and she dutifully cried at the required time. So that could be an innovation that could come through. Now, this is a couple of pictures of Chagall painted later, which he called "My Father." This is when Zacha was about 51. So you can see this hard-working laborer, this stoop-shouldered figure with the traditional glass of tea with lumps of sugar, and there's a cat and an old babushka next to him. He's kind of dressed like one of Van Gogh's postmen, but there's a sense of life here, I think, reduced by hard labor. Chagall went to the local cheder, where he studied traditional Hebrew Bible. There was no art of any kind in the home, of course. It is in conflict with one of the 10 Commandments, so I'll talk about that later. But he began copying images from books, and he found the experience so rewarding that he decided, quite young, to become an artist. And his childhood home, it provided the inspiration for many of his paintings. So this is one called Sabbath, where they're clearly resting or had too much to drink or something or other. His father was opposed to Chagall's art, but his mother encouraged him. But she remained baffled by it. At age 13, she took him to the local art school, which was run by a guy called Yehuda Penn. It's a self-portrait of him. And Chagall studied at Penn's studio for about 5 years, but he disliked Penn's traditional approach to painting. In 1906, he left, and he went to what is now St. Petersburg, Petrograd then, with an old friend, Victor Meckler. And Meckler introduced him to his friends, including Bella Rosenfeld, who later became his wife. So this is pictures of Bella. So she was attractive and wealthy and well-educated and sophisticated. And in his autobiography, My Life, Chagall described their first meeting. Her silence is mine, her eyes mine. I feel she has known me always, my childhood, my present life, my future. as if she were watching over me, divining my innermost being. But this is the first time I have seen her. I know that this is she, my wife. Now, he wrote it obviously to make a good story, but I do think their relationship was great throughout, really. She was his muse for 35 years. Now, at this time, Jews weren't permitted in St. Petersburg without an internal passport, but he managed to get a temporary permit, and he studied at the School of the Imperial Society for the Encouragement of the Fine Arts, which is a fantastic title for an art school, for 2 years. He won various prizes there, but as they found the atmosphere stifling as before, story of his life, and he left because of a disagreement with a teacher. He spent a year picking up odd painting jobs and, in fact, acting as a servant for somebody in order to retain his status. And for a few months, a guy called Baron David Günzburg was his patron. His economic survival at this point depended upon the whims of wealthy individuals who appreciated his talents. At one point, he was arrested because his permit to stay there was out of date, and he didn't have enough money to bribe the official, and so he spent a few days in prison. In 1909, Chagall became a student of Leon Bax at the Svanseva School of Drawing and Painting. Now, Bax's designs were flamboyant, and this clashed with Chagall's earthier style. For example, there's one called Dead Man, which he painted in 1908. Anything you see, what do you notice in this picture?
Fiddler on the roof.
Yeah.
There's a fiddler on the roof, absolutely. So that's very early for fiddlers on the roof. What sort of shop is he on the roof of?
It's a boot.
Oh, yeah, bootmaker.
Yeah, it's a cobbler shop. And traditionally, people apparently went on the roof in times of danger. What else do you notice in this picture?
Either asleep or dead in the street.
Yeah, it's supposed to be someone dead. It's not in a Jewish pose, but it's there's definitely a corpse there. So maybe the violinist is playing some mournful music, and there's a excuse me, a woman. Yeah, what's she doing? Mourning, or she looks at me as she's screaming, and it's completely out of the sizes of the people don't work with the houses. This violinist is interesting. He's got his back to us, as if he's kind of disinterested in what's going on, or in his something odd's going on. It's not a contented picture, this one.
Creating an atmosphere.
He is.
He's conveying the feeling.
Yeah. It's uneasy, isn't it? It's something not right about this. In 1910, age 23, he found a sponsor, Maxime Vinava, and he moved to Paris, which of course was the center of the art world. He was initially lonely there, unable to speak French, but there was no, at least official, anti-Semitism. So he enrolled in a couple of the painting schools there, not the main one, same as in St. Petersburg. He couldn't get into the elite ones. And he devoted himself to his art, living a Spartan life. And for almost 3 years, he painted without selling anything. He moved to a small studio in Montparnasse, and there he started to produce some of the best pictures of his life. And all these were based on scenes from Vitebsk. So this is a famous one called The Wedding. So I don't know what you can see here. Anything that strikes you here?
There's a milk knife off in the corner there.
There is, isn't there? Yeah. Somebody, 2 pails of milk,
Yeah.
carrying on his work, yeah?
It's quite a different style. It's much more straight and almost
Geometric.
mathematical, if you like.
Cubist is the style, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there any significance of it? There's still quite a lot of dark characters, more of a, is there any significance to them?
Clearly there must be. I mean, these are
There's a lot of colour, and then you've got the
the black coats. Yeah, well, presumably Hasidic, I would guess.
No, so the zoom can hear.
So the women are dressed colourfully, I think, and most of the men are in black coats. The guy with the pails is in work gear for some reason.
And there's a violinist.
There is another violinist, absolutely, absolutely. Another one, this one's called I Am the Village. Another different style altogether. Very, very dreamlike, this one, isn't it?
Yeah.
The bright colours, a green-faced man. What's he holding?
Looks like it might be grapes, but
I think it's supposed to be the tree of life, actually, yeah.
he's put a lot of animal heads into his pictures.
He does, doesn't he? Yeah, a lot of animal heads. And I think there's the reason behind that. If you look at Midrash, that's what there is, particularly Hasidic stories. They introduce this very easily into the story. So for him, there was no distinction between his fantasy world and the real world. This is how he saw it, really. You've got something called a self-portrait with 7 figures. And this derives from the Yiddish expression mit 7 Finger, which means to do it very well or quickly. So he's doing his art very well. So he's obviously cubist. He's got long curly hair. What's in the top left of the picture?
The Eiffel Tower.
The Eiffel Tower, yeah.
And there's some Hebrew up there as well.
There is some Hebrew, yeah. Can you see what it says? Actually Yiddish, but it's Hebrew letters. It's different, it's very faint. Sorry?
No vowels, I can't read it.
No,
Something Aleph Reish, but I can't read
there's a pay before,
Pay on French.
and there's a samach afterwards, but
Oh.
whether you can actually,
Pasha?
it's not a Hebrew word.
Oh.
Paris.
Of course.
And then on the right-hand side, you've got Vitebsk. So the other Hebrew is actually saying Russia, but you can't tell it, Yiddish word. So it's like got these two two different aspects of his life. This is Paris through the window. Wow, lots of images here. Make of this what you like. What do you see here?
A human cat.
Human cat, absolutely.
Double-headed man.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a Janus figure, isn't it? Yeah.
Two-faced, yeah.
What's all that about, do you think?
Looking east, looking west.
Yeah, maybe past and future. So if you say looking east, what if you? What, yeah, and yeah,
Could be his inner psyche coming out.
could be, absolutely.
I think artists are quite deep, aren't they?
Not for you.
Well, there's somebody hanging from something at the top of the picture.
Yes.
Almost like they've jumped off the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, it's like a parachute, really. Is he coming down to ground? Is he up there? I think this represents his struggle between Vitebsk, the solidity of Vitebsk and the artistic lure of Paris, really.
Right. And he's got horizontal figures.
He
sort of
has.
just below the tower.
Yeah. So that's, although it looks like Hasidic, they're not. There's a woman in a broad hat and a man with a walking stick.
They remind me of Mary Poppins.
Yes, that's probably where they got the image from.
I wasn't brave enough to say it.
And
No, I'm off mic, it's fine.
can you see this train just to the left of the camera?
Yes, yeah.
It's kind of upside down.
Uh-huh.
So where's it going? Maybe Vitebsk, maybe, I don't know, who knows? So in 1913, he sold his first work outside Russia when the gallery owner and art dealer Herbert Walden exhibited 3 of his works. So this is Havath. And Chagall accepted an invitation from Walden for a solo show to be held in June 1914. And the exhibition was a great success. After its opening, he continued on to Vitebsk. And there he painted. He painted the demise of the Jewish world. And he created the most important collection of paintings of it, really. So this one's called Over Vitebsk, and you can see it's back to these muted colors. The vibrancy is all about Paris. So this is Vitebsk. You've got this larger than life peddler floating along in snow-filled streets. And here we've got a picture of Vitebsk. What's missing from the buildings in Vitebsk that he's drawn? We haven't seen anything so far.
Windows, mostly.
No, they've got, I mean, actual buildings. There's a type of building. What is this building here that he's drawn?
Looks like a castle.
It's a church.
Oh, it's a church. Oh.
So we don't see, in his drawing, there's nothing about synagogues.
Right.
That's a really odd sort of thing. This, a Yiddish Luftmensch, do you know what that means? Luftmensch is a man.
Flying man. Flying man.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I can't see you on my screen, so you have to come up quicker. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
A man of the air, that's right. And what's it mean, do you know? Do you know what it means in English? I mean, what the connotation's all about. So, someone who's maybe overtly involved in intellectual pursuits. So it's not a complimentary thing. Up in the clouds, maybe we'd call them. So this is not someone who's grounded in reality, and Chagall's got him flying, obviously. Another one he painted was called Red Dew. And then you've got Feast Day. Well, this Feast Day is one interesting. This is a rabbi, a proper rabbi this time. What do you notice? Rabbi with the lemon. So clearly is the etrog, presumably.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you see what he's got in his head?
Another rabbi.
Another rabbi, exactly. Why he's got that, I don't know. But maybe it just goes on infinitely, like standing on the shoulders of whatever, who knows. He thought his best ever painting was this one, The Praying Jew, which actually is of the rabbi of Vitebsk. And you can see he's wearing tefillin. And it's iconically Jewish. Well, or is it? What's he actually holding in his hand?
Is that a pipe?
The right hand, sorry?
That's, on the right? No, I can't see it.
I mean, it's not clear, but it could be rosary beads, actually.
Oh.
So is it subversive in the way that he's drawn it? Who knows? Now, he planned to stay no longer than 3 months in Vitebsk, enough time to marry Bella, despite not having seen her for 4 years. However, after a few weeks, what happened? The war broke out. That closed the Russian border, and it prevented him from returning to Paris for 8 years. He was also having difficulty convincing Bella's parents that he would be a suitable husband for their daughter. You can see, sort of through this, that he rouged his cheeks. And at that time, marrying your daughter off to someone wearing makeup wasn't the in thing. However, Bella was determined to do this. His argument about this, he said it was no different painting his face to painting on the canvas. So what was the difference about it? There probably was something, by the way, about it. He probably was, I don't know, bisexual, because there was certainly had a relationship with Mekla, so who knows what was going on, really. Bella was determined to marry him because she was determined to get one over her parents, and they eventually were under a red chuppah on the 25th of July, 1915. And 3 weeks before the marriage, on his birthday, he painted this one called The Birthday. And I mean, compared with some of the miserable ones he's before, he clearly loved Bella. This is an ecstasy, a love in ecstasy of colours, isn't it?
And line and very soft lines.
It is. Very romantic. What time of the day is it? Well, it's tricky to say. If you look out the windows, one window it's night and one window it's day. So
what happens, when you laugh.
exactly, time just merges. It's just kind of a, and you can see he's bending around to get to her. He's the adapting one. She's the solid figure in this. He's moving around her. And not quite 10 months after their marriage, they had a daughter, Ida. And this is a picture of her. Now, Chagall was not a natural father. Initially, he was really irritated that she wasn't a son. And he stayed away from them for 4 days. He didn't have strong paternal instincts and was frequently exasperated with Ida's crying. He was drafted into the army, but through the influence of Bella's brother, he got a desk job in Petrograd. 1915, he started exhibiting his work in Moscow, and that brought him recognition and critical attention. A number of wealthy collectors began buying his art, and he received his first public commission, murals for the Cheder in the largest Petrograd synagogue. So by the time of the 1917 revolution, the first one in February, he was one of Russia's most distinguished artists, and he enjoyed special privileges. And he welcomed Kerensky's revolution as it swept away all the restrictions on Jews. He was also appointed the Commissar of Arts for Vitebsk, his hometown. And there he founded the Free Academy of Art, which became the most distinguished school of art in the entire Soviet Union. He promoted avant-garde experimental art rather than the sort of traditional Soviet art that we think of, these uplifting portraits of heroic men and bustling muscles in the fields. And those are that sort of pictures he was supposed to be promoting. And these artistic differences meant that he had to resign, really. He was forced to do that as commissar. And he became anti the whole thing after a while. I'm jumping ahead because he only painted this in 1937. It's called The Revolution. I think it shows what he thought about it. It took him quite over a decade to get his thoughts in order, really. Yeah, absolutely. So, what do you see here?
Balagan.
Balagan, okay, absolutely. Anything? I mean, any particular Balagan you're referring to?
I'm intrigued by the ass sitting down on. Looks like it's sitting down on a chair.
Yeah, that's probably a member of the Politburo. Probably what he thought of some of the the leaders. Yeah, absolutely. But who's?
There's a rabbi there with a scroll.
Yeah.
And somebody doing what looks like acrobats.
So the rabbi, how does he look?
Very sad.
Very sad.
He's a rather sad figure of tradition, which is on a crossroad and just thinking what's going on.
Absolutely.
So it's not desperate, but it's just very, very sad.
What's the significance of the man balancing on one leg?
So that is likely to be Lenin, actually, the one upside down.
Yeah.
Oh.
So does it mean that he's turned the original, turn the world, or the original idea behind it? Lots of people are really idealistic behind the Russian Revolution. He was getting rid of a regime like Putin's, the Tsar's regime, but of course eventually it was to bring back another regime which was even worse. Well, maybe not even worse, but another terrible regime. Yeah, so you can see, I mean, by Lenin's leg, you've got this tricolour, obviously, and his right hand has lost control of the flag. Now, what's on the flag, the red flag? What should have been on the flag?
Hammer and sickle.
A hammer and sickle. Is it a hammer and sickle?
No, it's a ayin.
It's an aleph, actually, probably.
Oh, an aleph.
Yeah.
Doesn't look. Oh.
Yeah, it's just the old. So it's just what's going on there. It's some connotations going on there. And on the, as you said, it's Balagan on the left. This is the mob, I think, on the left, which is kind of. So, you don't know. You come on in.
I just think it's very symbolic because the red flag, which is supposed to be the symbol of the new regime of the Soviet era, it also symbolizes blood, and also symbolizes blood of a lot of Jewish people when he died. And also it's quite symbolic that he actually painted this in 1937, which is a very famous year of repression. And literally, you know, there was before 1937, I mean, Holodomor in Ukraine was before that, but 1937, it was the year when there were troikas, you know, 3 people, and the 1,100 of people were killed, murdered, which was called at the time, you were given 10 years without the right to be in touch with the family, which meant that all those people were murdered. So it's a devastating year in the history of the Soviet Union, when literally everyone realized that whatever revolution fought for, it became even more murderous and more horrendous regime than the Tsarist Russia was.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's exactly right. That's why I did it, yeah. So you've got this mob to the left, the revolutionaries, and to the right, you've got the lyrical shtetl world and its dreaming artists. Doesn't look very strong to me. It's not going to survive that. So I think he was a kind of a death scene he was painting here, really. So he was probably thinking this at the time, but obviously it only came out 13 or so years later. June 1920, he moved to Moscow, where he became the stage designer for the newly formed State Jewish Chamber Theatre. And for its opening in 1921, he created a number of large background murals, one of which, this is a picture of it, is 9 foot by 24 feet long. So it's got lots of really interesting images here. You've got dancers and fiddlers and acrobats and farm animals. And how does this come across? What images are supposed to be coming across here? Or what sort of feeling does it give you? Lots happening. Good things, bad things.
I think both is almost like symbolizes life.
Mainly good. It's an entertainment.
It is, yeah. It's a positive. The colours are positive, I think. It's supposed, but it's not all in one way. People are tumbling at the same time, and it topples and balances, though. And it's like no rules. You've got, I don't know if you can see this person on his head towards the right is wearing tefillin, and he's doing acrobat. So it's just like really crazy what's going on in this thing, really.
Is it showing the richness of the culture at the time?
I think quite possibly, yeah. And anything went in this situation. There was no kind of rules about it. I think he felt very positive about it.
Yeah, but everyone felt very positive because actually, you know, for the Jewish people, there was a moment of hope.
Yes,
they believed
absolutely.
in the revolution so much after being oppressed for so long, and particularly in the period of settlement of the poverty. They believed that for once all Jews will be equal.
Exactly.
And Yiddish theatre, it was a dream to come true. So
Exactly.
they really believed that they would be recognized as equal citizens, and Jewish people were very hopeful until this Michaels was murdered.
Yeah.
In Minsk, literally, but yeah, so there's a time when you're right, in hope and spring, Jewish spring.
But I think it's also fair to say this art, which is very positive, it kind of ignored the misery of life at the time. So famine was widespread, there was war, Chagall's financial situation was desperate. He wasn't paid for this work at the theatre. He was living with his family in a one-room apartment where snow fell through a hole in the ceiling. In the summer of 1922, his friends arranged an exhibition of 65 of his paintings in Lithuania, and he secured an exit visa. And Bella and Ida followed at the end of the year. Now, he claimed that he only went back to the West to further his art, but if he had stayed in USSR, Stalin would surely have killed him, along with other people. So he went to Berlin to recover the 40 pictures that you remember he'd left on its exhibit 10 years earlier, but Walden had sold them to private collectors by this time. And German hyperinflation meant that the money he had collected was worthless. So Chagall had gained fame, but no fortune. He returned to Paris in 23 and formed a business relationship with the French art dealer Ambroise Vollard. Now, Vollard commissioned him to create etchings for a series of illustrated books, including Gogol's Dead Souls, and you can see some of the etchings, and also the classic Fable de la Fontaine. He was well suited to this, as much of his art is whimsical and simplified, as if seeing the world through children's eyes. He had left 150 of his paintings stored in one of his previous Parisian studios, but they had all disappeared. So all his art, basically, he created had gone. And he started to recreate these missing works. Amazing stoicism to kind of do that, really. In 1924, as his standard of living improved, he moved into a spacious studio, and he traveled extensively throughout France. This is a photo of him with Bella and Ida at the time. So he looks, and he's wearing this blazer. He looks dandified to me, like a spoilt aristocrat in some ways. And he also looks a bit sexually ambiguous. You can see some of his famous art behind him, the ones I've shown you. It's there in his studio. So there's the birthday and the praying rabbi is there. In 1924, he painted Ida at her window, and also Bella with a carnation. Now, these are really very accessible pictures, I think. There's nothing crazy about these pictures. This is a contented period of his life. He was in balance. He's not radical or rebelling anymore. 1926, he had his first exhibition in the States. And in 1928, he painted this famous one, The Lovers, Les Amoureux. So this is Chagall and Bella. And this seems odd to me, I guess it shows how sexist I am. He's on her shoulder, and you kind of expect it the other way around. It's almost like she's mothering him, isn't it? He's obviously getting a lot of nurture from her. And she's got her eyes open, maybe seeing the future, maybe being his guide. Maybe it's reality as well as a bit of fantasy all at the same time. He was invited to Palestine in 1931 by Mayor Dizengoff, Mayor of Tel Aviv, and he was offered there the chair of the Museum of Jewish Art. He stayed there 2 months and did some painting, including this one, The Wailing Wall. Now, I don't know, but to me, this doesn't, if I saw this, I wouldn't have guessed it's Chagall.
No.
You agree, yeah?
Yeah, well, there's not a lot of colour.
Yeah.
It's very obvious. There are no images or sort of asides to it. It's just straightforward art.
Yeah. And it's not enchanting. It's not alive. It's not, no one's flying around. I'm not sure he was he said he always loved the place, but I don't think he was inspired by it.
Yeah.
Well, clearly not, looking at the painting.
Yeah.
That's what's interesting with his paintings. It always expresses also to a certain extent in the way he is himself.
Exactly. He just came out, isn't it? Yeah. He'd be terrible at poker. Now, Vollard, at this point, commissioned Chagall to some of his most famous paintings, which was to illustrate the Hebrew Bible. So here I've got a couple of them. So what's the picture on the left about? Which famous?
Is that Adam and Eve?
I'd say Adam and Eve.
Yes. What particular bit of Adam and Eve?
The temptation, the serpent?
Now they've been tempted, there's no serpent there.
Right. Oh, yes, the expulsion from the garden.
Exactly. Well done, that man.
Yeah.
Definitely. And the one on the right?
David and his
David
heart,
must be.
or his Jews, what's it?
Yes, exactly. Well done. So by 1932, he completed 32 of these. There was 105 plates in total. And they're kind of inspired by shtetl life, most of them, not by life in Palestine at the time. He eventually completed this huge task in 1956. So here's a couple more of them. I do think they're amazing. Anyone idea about these two? The one on the left? Less common stories, but maybe.
It could be Abraham and Sarah. It could be, who was it?
It's an old
Rachel and,
Yeah, Rachel.
You're in the wrong book.
Rachel.
I'm in the wrong book.
Wrong book.
Ah.
Think of one of the festivals as well.
Deborah? No.
She's got a book of name.
Ruth.
Ruth with Boaz.
Ruth.
Absolutely.
I meant
so.
Ruth when I said Deborah.
Oh. That was my fault then.
I've not been well, no. Not been
And who's the other guy? Again, he's got a book after him.
That Jacob's tree? No.
He's got a book after him.
Oh, right.
Elijah?
No. We don't look at it much in Judaism. Christians are very keen on it. This is, no, it's not. No, it's Job praying about what on earth has gone wrong with his life.
Why is he green?
He ate the wrong food. Shrek, I don't know. Now, his daughter, Ida, married Michael Rappaport in 1933. And Chagall felt that this marriage was an unwelcome intrusion on their relationship. And he painted this picture called The Bridal Chair. And you can see the bride, it's shrouded in a white shawl, and its occupant is not Ida, but a spray of white flowers. And the groom is another large bouquet of white flowers. And next to the pronged candelabra, there's a yahrzeit candle going, which isn't great for a marriage, is it really? In 1933, it's proving your point, but he had to paint what he was feeling. 1933, the Nazis ridiculed his work and called it degenerate. His art was confiscated from museums and his paintings burned.
I don't know if it's intentional.
Sorry. Yeah.
But if you look towards the upper left of the painting, it looks like almost a cross.
Yeah.
There's lots of Christological stuff, which I'll come to. It painted crucifixions a lot. So this is 1933, and you got another sad-looking rabbi. The rabbis are never happy, it must be said. I don't know whether this is, I don't know.
It's a poor living.
So there he is, clutching his Sefer Torah, resting his weary head. This is religion without solace.
Well, maybe if his congregant is the donkey and he's got no other congregants, it's no wonder he's sad.
Yeah, good thing there.
It's a clever animal, though.
It's also
Let's play.
interesting that he's using religious figures, rabbis, to express sadness.
Yes, I think that is interesting.
Freud would have something to say about this, wouldn't he?
Yes, he would.
To interpret some of these pictures.
Yeah. So we've got an angel hovering over a burning town, flying away from it, though. It's as if people know what's happening. It's dark and foreboding. There's a black background. Where have all the fiddlers gone? And as you mentioned, he also obsessively painted Christian scenes, particularly Jesus on the cross, without being fully clear about what this really meant for him. Just after Kristallnacht in November 38, he finished one of his most famous ones, White Crucifixion, which was really his version of Guernica and of Jewish suffering. So what do you see here?
Well, there's another shtetl figure leaving on the bottom right.
Yeah.
Is that a Chanukia at the bottom, in the middle? Or just a candelabra?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
There's a scroll sort of falling away, running away. Don't know what that is.
And there's a fire, that must be on the right.
1938.
Yeah.
Something fire, yeah.
What's the next? You've got someone carrying the skull, haven't you?
You have.
Oh, yeah, yes, as well.
Running
So
away with it.
One's
yeah.
trying to carry one and one's
And
destroying
Jesus
one.
has got a tulip there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is that a sort of ark? above the two bottom figures, it looks like a boat almost, is it?
Yeah, they're kind of escaping in a boat, aren't they?
Right.
Yeah. It's not actually Jesus, by the way. It's a Jesus-type figure, but you can't really see it. In the bit which you would normally have, you know, this inscription of him, they've actually got Marc, so it's actually got his name in it. So it's him that's being crucified as a, I don't know, a representative of the Jewish people or something. But this, or if it is Jesus, Jesus is wearing a talit. He's definitely Jewish in this.
It could be both in this expressing what was happening, reflecting what was happening around him, and it's so shocked horror, so it also expresses his own feelings about what was happening. So it's kind of, for once, it's actually two-sided, you know?
Absolutely.
Reflection, personal and reflective of history.
Absolutely.
Is there any significance to the title of it? This white crucifixion?
If there is, I don't know. It's a good question. You've obviously got the Soviet peasants with the red flags on the left, raised sabers. They're not good news. They've got some murderous intent. You've got these floating rabbinical figures in the top who are covering their eyes. So he's kind of turned the Jesus figure into a symbol of Jewish suffering. But the painting has been used, obviously, to say that Jews can only be redeemed by Jesus. So it's incredibly controversial, this type of art, and we don't tend to show it in these sort of talks. Now, he was so immersed in his art that he didn't appreciate what was happening politically in France at the time. Oh, sorry, big one.
Do you think it's white because white was the sign of mourning? The white Jewish people were covered in white clothes when they were buried in Israel, and also white was the color of mourning for the kind of the ancient sort of kind of forerunners, the wild ones, and also it's white being also kind of color of purity.
Yeah, that all sound plausible. You can carry on giving the talk if you like, actually.
No, I'm just earning.
No, I
earning,
think it's right. I think it's really
earning
good.
my bread, you know, giving
I
at least
think-
5 penny when I can.
I guess
Feeling useful.
absolutely. So immersed in his art, they didn't really realise what was happening politically in France. In April 1941, he was arrested, but was released when his American friends put pressure on the police, and he left France in May. He arrived in New York, age 53, and he discovered that he was famous. He was signed up by the son of the artist Matisse, who was called Pierre. 1942, he designed the sets and costumes for a new ballet called Aleppo. This stunning orange backdrop, smudged sunset over a wheat field. It was a great success and much acclaim. And in response to the war in Europe, he painted numerous pictures. So here we've got flames engulfing a city and rising from the burning red hair of a nursing mother. Jewish refugee is fleeing. A horse with a rooster on its back struggles to lift an earth-borne cart and transform it into a dream of escape. 2nd of September 1944, Bella died suddenly, age 49, from a streptococcus infection. It was untreated because of wartime shortages of penicillin, so it was really tragic. He needed to die. And he just finished his rapturous work, To My Wife, which had taken him 11 years to paint. So here we've got, she's naked on the couch. It's this youthful bride and groom. He just adored her, clearly. And after her death, he stopped work for several months. When he resumed painting, his first pictures were concerned with preserving her memory. So we've got the adolescents, the sort of romantic, embracing couples. Shortly afterwards, his long-standing housekeeper resigned and was replaced by the 29-year-old Virginia Haggard, who soon became Chagall's lover. And they had a 7-year relationship, which was kept under wraps actually, and only came out in the 70s. He painted Lovers on the Bridge, 1946. So you can see he's at the easel being consoled and embraced by Bella actually, and Virginia is on the right. So he was really she was kind of a bit of an embarrassment in some ways. It's a very odd sort of picture really. He's conceited and guilty. Virginia lived in the shadow of Bella, and she remained his secret companion whilst Ida ran both her father's business and social life. She became pregnant, and Chagall did his usual trick. He disappeared to Paris before the birth, and she had to beg money off friends to settle bills. David, who was named after Chagall's brother, was born on the 22nd of June. Chagall this time didn't return to her to see her son for 2 months after his birth. He moved to France in August 1948, as he felt this was the only place for an artist of his stature to be. And in the 1950s, his art began to sell for high prices. So we've got Lovers with Daisies here. So here we've got a youthful Chagall embraced by, is it Bella, is it Virginia? While the painter conjures flowers and birds and fruits circle around them. He also started to work on ceramics, such as this. He visited Israel many times, including in 1951, where he had an overwhelmingly exuberant reception, and he met Golda Meir. But on this trip, Virginia felt distanced and was kept in the background, and on their return, they separated. He broke with her completely and refused to see her son for 2 years. His daughter Ida married a Swiss art historian, Franz Meyer, and she realized how lonely Chagall was. He clearly needed a mother figure around him all the time. He needed a muse, really. So she introduced him to the 40-year-old Valentina, or Baba Brodsky, who had a similar Russian Jewish background to him, although by this point she'd converted to Christianity, and she was running a milliner's shop in London. Now she became his secretary, but after a few weeks agreed to stay only if Chagall married her, which he did in July 1952. This is the days before Tinder, you see. So they married just 4 months after Virginia had left. Baba quickly took over the running of his life, and he became very productive artistically. So I'm sure he was happy. 1960-61, he created these windows in Jerusalem, the Hadassah windows. So these are 12 11 by 8 foot stained glass windows for the 12 tribes of Israel. And it's at the medical center at the university. 63, he was commissioned to paint the ceiling of the Paris Opera. And this took a year to complete. It was presented in front of 2,100 guests. There's over 500 pounds weight of paint on the ceiling. 64, he created a 15 by 12 foot stained glass window called Peace for the UN building in New York, in honor of the recently assassinated Dag Hammarskjöld. So you can see symbols of peace and love can be found throughout this panel. He also painted 2 monumental murals. I don't know if you've ever seen these in the Lincoln Center. They're amazing. They're 30 foot by 36 feet high. You don't get an impression of them here, but they really will be. They cover this entire wall at the back. The Sources of Music, and the other one is called The Triumph of Music. So they're in the Opera House when you next go to New York. And then when you're next in the south of France, you have to go to the museum there in Nice. Actually, it's near Saint Paul de Vence, where he lived. And it houses his famous painting, My Life, which is supposed to be summing up, really, a record of his dreams, experiences, memories. So you've got his marriage to Bella, and you've got the birth of Ida, and you've got Chagall on the right, I suppose, reflecting on his life with Varvar wrapping her arms around him. And I mentioned earlier, the other place you got to go to is Chudley in Kent. All Saints Church in Chudley. It's a very small little church. All it's got is these stained glass windows. It's the only church to have all its windows decorated by Chagall. Really worth a visit. He continued to paint well into his 90s and finished his last work, Towards the Other Light, the day before he died. So you can see he's a young painter. Chagall is winged already. He's got his angel's wings on. He's ready to leave. Another angel, arms outstretched to the painter, descends from the sky, ready to carry him off. And the painting in the couple in the painting, there's Chagall and Bella, with a man extending a bouquet of flowers through the frame to the painter. So he died on the 28th of March, 1985, aged 97, and he's buried alongside Baba in the Catholic cemetery in St. Paul de Vence. Now, it's interesting about his Judaism. Traditionally, the second commandment's prohibitions on creating graven images outlawed Jews from creating any representational art, which is why his father was so against it. Chagall rejected this entirely. He didn't practice any religion, but through his art, tried to suggest a universal message, using both Jewish and Christian themes. So here's one around Purim, for example. And you can see that Purim is actually written in there in the top. It's all about exchanging gifts, this picture, very simple picture. He had a nostalgic, superstitious, and conflicted relationship with Judaism, but he drew upon his Jewish childhood for artistic material. So he grew up hearing these midrashim, comfortable mixing up traditions of history and myth. And he was also inspired by the Bible. I've got another one from the famous series of sketches he drew. Which one? What's this about? Where's this taken from? What scene is this?
Burning bush?
It is the burning bush. So this is Moses hearing the word of God, the name of God. And you can see this quote from him: "The Bible has captured my imagination ever since I was a very young child. To me, it has always seemed the greatest source of poetry the world has ever known. And since then, I have sought its reflection in life and in art. The Bible is like a resonance of nature, and that secret is what I have tried to transmit." Thanks, Marc. Chagall. Does anyone have any questions or comments or thoughts?
Yeah, what was his link with this church in Kent? Why did that happen?
Because, it's a tragic story. So Goldsmith was a Jewish part of the establishment here. He had a daughter who was Christian, who tragically died in a boating accident, and he commissioned Chagall to do the big blue stained glass one, which actually depicts it. Going the wrong way. Hold on. Get back to it. I'm not sure you can see it that clearly. Yeah, the blue one is the main one, which actually shows her love of the sea and her life. Chagall came across and saw this and thought, it goes so well in this little church, but he said, I'm going to do all the other windows for you. And what's great about it is that they're at eye level. So you can actually, it's a very small little thing. It's like a chapel on the church. So you can actually walk around and see them all, and it's just fantastic, really. So, yeah, she was a huge fan of his art. So it's kind of a memorial to her, really, what it was all about. Any other questions online? Michael, I'm sure you must have something. Oh, sorry, there's another one down below. Yes, do come on in. I'll stop sharing so we can see.
Right. Can you hear me? Can
Yes.
you hear? Right, right. Thank you. I thought I knew a lot about Chagall until this evening, and obviously it was so interesting and so many paintings. I had no idea. But I just want to tell you, when I was 16, I did an exchange. I went to Paris and a Jewish family and shared the bedroom with my exchange. And on the wall, there was this painting with a horse upside down in the sky. And I thought, I couldn't understand this painting. And I made some comment to Martine, the French girl, and she told me that it was a Chagall, it was a Chagall painting. And in fact, the family were very knowledgeable about art. And it's thanks to, really, I suppose, this painting and Martine that my own interest was awakened, and I, learned something about art. Yeah, but thank you for a lovely, very interesting talk.
Thank you for your story. It's lovely, yeah.
Well, if we don't have any more questions, I would like to say thank you so much for another absolutely fascinating tour. It's always just such a joy. I was surprised, the new thing for me was actually the joke, that painting for me. And so clearly, you always can surprise us when people know a little bit about the subject you would like to talk about, the person you would like to talk about. And I would like to say to all of our guests here watching us online, if you want more or a bit of a reminder, in the book of Audacious Jewish Lives in 2 volumes, recently by Jonathan, you can purchase it online. To be continued. Jonathan, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And just one last thing, in 2 weeks' time, I think.
Yep.
Oh, we have a treat. Leonard Bernstein, who is fantastic. And I'll be playing music. It will sound a lot better in here. So if you were able to come, it would be you'll get a lot out of it by coming here. And there's lots of space, so I'm sure it will be easy to find your own space. So hopefully see some of you in 2 weeks' time.
Yay. Have a lovely evening.